Good evening. I would like to extend a warm welcome and thank you for joining our presentation this evening. My name is Cindy Schufelt and I'm a school support counselor with Safe Schools and Wellbeing. And I'm here tonight with my colleague Caitlin, who I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to tonight's presentation. We are very, very happy to have you with us. As Cindy mentioned, my name is Caitlin Chow, and I also work with the Thames Valley District School Board in the Safe Schools and Wellbeing portfolio. I have the privilege of working with a number of schools as an implementation coach, helping ensure that our students have safe and inclusive learning environments.
Great, thank you. So we're very fortunate to be a part of this collaboration, and we do work with local school boards and other community agencies to be able to host many presentations throughout the year. So if you tonight will have a look at the slide that I have up on the slide, you will see it will take you to the Family Wellbeing Community Workshop Series. Does have many other webinars that we've done in the past, as well as the upcoming. And just before I introduce our speakers, I just want to let our audience know how you can communicate with us should you have any questions during the presentation. So if you were to look in the top toolbar in Teams, you're going to see an image of two overlapping speech bubbles with question marks in them. And if you hover over that image, you will see the Q&A. So at any time that you would like to ask any questions, that will relay it back to the speakers at the conclusion of our presentation. So it's also important to recognize that our session is being recorded and that we ask that you not share any of your name or identifiers to protect your privacy. And if you have any questions that are specific to your family, we would just ask that you be able to contact either Caitlin or myself at a later date, and we can follow up with you privately. So tonight we're thrilled to welcome Claire Billick, and I apologize if I say your name wrong, who's a registered dietitian with the Middlesex London Health Unit, and as well as Kelly Ferguson, as well another registered dietitian with Southwest Public Health. And I'm going to turn it over to them to start their presentation.
Thank you, Cindy and Caitlin. I will just start sharing my screen and then we'll get started. So hoping that you can see my slides all right. Okay, perfect. So my name is Claire and I'm one of the registered dietitians with the Middlesex London Health Unit, and I'm thrilled to be here with my colleague Kelly from Southwestern Public Health. And we will be sharing and speaking to you about strategies for supporting children's relationship with food and body. Before we begin, Kelly and I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that as registered dietitians, we love food, and we have this image that was shared to us by another registered dietitian of some blueberries, which is an example of one of the many gifts that our land provides, certainly one of my favorites. And we do want to mention and acknowledge that our profession as dietitians, a lot of our training and resources have been directly impacted by colonization. And recently, we've really begun to learn a lot more about the role that our profession played in particular, nutrition experiments conducted on Indigenous children in residential schools here in Canada. Which was done without informed consent, and this research informed national nutrition guidelines, and this, along with other colonial policies, resulted in food insecurity and long-term boil water advisories in Indigenous communities, which have influenced modern health disparities for Indigenous peoples. Southwestern Public Health and Middlesex London Health Unit are on Indigenous land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, Attawandaron, and Mississauga of the Credit. and Mississauga nations. And then for Middlesex London, the 3 First Nation communities are the Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, the Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware First Nation. As settlers, we are grateful for the opportunity to be here, and we thank all the generations of people before us who have taken care of this land for thousands of years, long before us. Okay. So for today, we are going to a bit of an outline. We will discuss what diet culture is. We'll introduce the term and explain what it means, how it shows up, and why we should care about challenging it with our children. And then we plan to share some tips to help nurture that positive relationship with food and body. We'll share some resources, and then at the end, we're planning to have some time to answer any questions that come up. We do have a disclaimer that we wanted to share as well, that as part of our discussion today, we will be talking about food and body image, which can be a sensitive topic for folks. So if at any time you need to step away, please do what's best for yourself and take a break if you need to. And we will be putting in the chat the NEDIC, the National Eating Disorder Information Helpline, and they also have a live chat available, as well as other mental health support, such as the phone number for Reach Out. So that's available for you should you need it. This is a common saying, you are what you eat. We've likely all said this, myself included. And while it's well intended, the purpose of today is to perhaps take a step back and reflect and think about the things that we might say about food to ourselves and to our children. Generally, the intention behind this statement is, if you eat healthy, you will be healthy, but working in public health, we know that this is not necessarily true. There's a lot of factors that are outside an individual's control, and it can also be, a messaging such as this can be really confusing for younger children, and we'll get into a little bit about that throughout the presentations. Our words really matter, and we are in a position where our children are looking up to us as trusted adults. And so the intention today is not to shame or blame or make you feel guilty in any way. Rather, our hope is that we welcome you into a learning space to kind of pull apart things that we might have accepted as true for a really long time about food and nutrition and weight. And we're going to be talking about a lot of content, and it is a lot to unpack. So it's okay if at the end of this you take away 1 or 2 things. That's I think Kelly and I's biggest hope for this. It's not all on your shoulders. Diet culture it's everywhere, not just in the parent-child relationship. And unlearning diet culture takes a lot of self-compassion and patience and time, and that's okay. Kelly and I are still in the process of learning and unlearning. And so we hope that you're kind to yourself throughout this process and this journey.
You look great. Have you lost weight is pretty common to say. And then there's also this huge diet and weight loss industry that's trying to sell us the latest product to make us thinner. And especially right now in January, we're pretty much inundated with diet and weight loss ads. So our society's obsession with weight comes up in so many different ways that it's understandable that so much of our value and self-worth and judgment are placed on our body size. And this is what contributes to diet culture. We define diet culture as this kind of system of beliefs that basically equates being thin to being good, and being thin to being healthy. And the belief that being fat is bad for our health or is not good, and that our body size is totally within our individual control. Diet culture is also this idea that what you eat determines your moral value. So for example, thinking to yourself like, oh, I'm so bad, I can't stick with this diet, or I'm just not strong enough, and kind of taking that personal responsibility as a moral failing. It's also this belief that dieting or restricting our food in some way is the best way to be healthy or to lose weight. And essentially that is basically kind of normalizing disordered eating, or that those things are part of disordered eating. And with diet culture, the one thing about it is that it kind of tells you that your goal for your body, or its primary function, is to make you look a certain way. And that kind of separates you from trusting yourself and listening to your own body. We know that, when it comes to eating, everyone has their own idea about what way of eating is best for our health. And there's so many rules around eating as a result of diet culture. And some of these are just so ingrained in our brains that we might not even notice they exist. And so diet culture is really sneaky, and it's just embedded in our society, and we don't notice when it comes up sometimes. And the one thing about diet culture that we wanted to highlight is that it really results in people in larger bodies experiencing discrimination. So it oppresses people who don't kind of fit in with that diet culture definition of what is healthy and what is not healthy. And that discrimination kind of disproportionately impacts people that are already marginalized. So people like women and trans individuals, or people from the BIPOC community. So important to acknowledge the impact of diet culture on people in larger bodies specifically, but it does impact all body sizes as well. So we just wanted to acknowledge that diet culture shows up in so many different settings. It shows up in the workplace, in healthcare, in your doctor's office, for example, in schools. It's in so many different ways that it's everywhere, basically. So just wanted to highlight a few ways that we kind of see it come up in school settings. We know that weight-based bullying is the most frequent type of bullying in the school setting, and that larger-bodied children are often kind of less accepted by their peers. We also see larger-bodied children maybe being excluded from activities in the school, maybe in gym class, and it could be something as simple as the fact that the pennies that are used in sports maybe just don't fit their body size. So in little ways like that, kids in larger bodies might be excluded. And then we also give so many messages about food, body, activity in lessons, or in just informal conversation with each other. So an example of a message that might kind of perpetuate diet culture is just saying like, oh, it's important to eat healthy to have a healthy body weight. Something like that kind of indirectly implies that students that have a larger body size must not eat healthy, and we know that that's not true. In the lunchroom, we can see diet culture show up. It's not uncommon for us to share our latest weight loss adventure or diet with colleagues and kind of get talking about that in the lunchroom. And then also even with students in the lunchroom, sometimes we see different policies come up, like or practices where a teacher or educator might say a healthy snack must be eaten first from your lunch. So these are all kind of different ways that diet culture can show up at school. And diet culture also shows up in our home environment, and probably in ways that you might not even notice. So for example, we might have rules about eating certain foods or when you can eat them, or we might even be restricting our own food choices in front of our children. So maybe we're on a diet and trying to lose weight, and our children are kind of seeing that. We also might comment on bodies, our own body or the bodies of other people that we encounter in our lives. And it also shows up a lot in the media, books, movies, things that we, media we consume. So just wanted to share on this slide a few examples of this. In diet culture, in children's media, larger bodied characters are kind of portrayed as more aggressive or evil, or they're not the popular group, and they might be portrayed eating food more often than thinner characters who are often portrayed as the social ones, or they're popular and happy. And just to highlight a few examples, one that's not on the slide is the example from the show Friends, which is really popular in my generation, and just the idea of Fat Monica, the character. And so when Monica is thin, she's portrayed as, attractive and lovable. but then when dressed in the fat suit as Fat Monica, she's portrayed as kind of pathetic and not able to stop eating. So that's just one example, but it shows up in cartoons and things for young children too. So Peppa Pig is on the slide, and that's a cartoon aimed at preschoolers. And kind of the running joke in that cartoon is that Daddy Pig is fat and he's constantly shamed for his weight. And just an example of that is in one episode when Peppa kind of makes the password for her treehouse Daddy's big tummy, and then she laughs at him when he can't fit inside the treehouse. Even recently, we've seen on the show Bluey, there was an episode titled Exercise, and it started in the bathroom with Bluey's parents kind of complaining about their weight on the scale and then saying, oh, I just need to exercise to lose weight. So fortunately, there was a bit of public outcry about that episode, and that episode has since been edited to remove that section, which is great. But you know, with all these examples, it's no wonder that kids start to pick up on this diet culture messaging so young. And so while so many things in the school environment might feel like a little bit out of our control as parents, the home environment is really a place where we can start to make a difference in creating a safe space for all body sizes and a safe food environment.
So why should we care, and why should we be careful about the way that we talk about weight? Well, body dissatisfaction and how children view others' bodies starts young. By age 4, children can start to associate negative characteristics with people living in larger bodies. By age 6, children start to express concern about their body weight and shape. By age 9 is when we are starting to see clinical diagnoses of eating disorders, and the trend is actually showing potentially even an earlier age onset of disordered eating and eating disorders. Recent stats are showing us that 46% of Ontario's youth in grades 7 to 12 report having a preoccupation with food and weight and have body image concerns, and that's from the Ontario Student Drug Use and Health Survey. So having this preoccupation with food and weight and body image concerns are known precursors to disordered eating. Another stat is 58% of adolescent girls report dieting, and most school boards have indicated that students have been reaching out for support related to eating concerns or issues. For older youth, by age 15 to 19, we're seeing 2/3 of teen girls and 1/3 of teen boys having attempted weight loss in the past as well. And so I would like to introduce to you 2 people and a list of words describing who they are and what they like to do. Take a moment to internally reflect on the words and associate them with the images of the people presented on the slide. The point of this activity is not to point fingers or to make anybody feel guilty. We hope that this helps to illustrate that everybody can have weight bias, and to kind of give us an opportunity to reflect on our internal personal weight bias that we might have. And once we know and understand more, that's the first step to being able to then make changes. We did want to take a moment to also go over and review some key terms as well. So weight bias is the conscious and unconscious negative thoughts that we would have towards individuals based on their weight, shape, or size or appearance. So for example, believing that all people that are in larger bodies are lazy. Weight stigma is the beliefs, assumptions, and judgments that we have towards individuals based on their weight, shape, or size. And so an example of this would be weight-based teasing. It's a result of our conscious and unconscious thoughts, feelings, and attitudes. And so an example, Jane is living in a larger body, so she must lay on the couch all day. Weight discrimination is when people act on their own biases and social stereotypes of folks living in larger bodies, which then in turn lead to the unjust, unfair treatment of those people. So for example, I'm not going to let Jane play on my soccer team. She can't possibly be a good soccer player. What about food? Why should we be cautious and careful about how we talk about food? So food is a sensitive topic, and everybody eats and has different experiences about food, and healthy eating means something different to everyone. So for example, on the slide, we have a picture of an ice cream cone. So some of us may look to that and think that looks delicious and that I want some, or have a memory of, you know, a hot summer day going to get ice cream. Others may look at it and feel guilty or feel bad or think that it's unhealthy. So these feelings that we have around food can be pretty loaded, and our kiddos can pick up on that. Simplistic messaging, such as the energy in, energy out equation, doesn't address the complexities of nutrition and eating. We could all eat the same and move the same, and there would still be body diversity among us as humans, just like we're all different heights and different shoe sizes. And in our culture today, it's really, unfortunately, it's pretty common for people to take healthy eating too far, and to the point where it becomes unhealthy. There's a type of eating disorder called orthorexia, which is just this. So kind of taking healthy eating to the extreme. Especially with social media and all the diets that we're seeing, for example, on social media, with social influencers sharing their eating habits and what they eat in a day and different behaviors, it's easy to get scared to eat anything. And it's constantly changing. And we know that food choices are influenced by culture, family, friends, feelings, emotions, environments, income, time, and other circumstances. Our goal as parents is to really help our children to learn to love a variety of foods and to have a positive relationship with food and their body in the long term. Changing the way we talk about food can help us with that.
So then you may kind of now be wondering, well, then how do I talk about food? So we just wanted to kind of reiterate that the first step is recognizing that healthy eating means more than just nutrition. It also means having a positive relationship with food. It is not all about nutrients. We know that healthy eating means things like honoring your family and cultural traditions, eating food that you enjoy. It also considers what foods are accessible to you and your family. And it includes eating a variety of different foods without feeling shame or guilt. Healthy eating means, eating in accordance with allergies that you might have or different medical conditions. And it's also about how we eat. So not just what we eat, but how we eat. Do we eat mindfully? Who do we eat with? Are we eating with family and friends? And so in short, it's flexible, right? It means something different to everybody. And we have a picture on the slide of Canada's food guide, and we often see that used as a way to teach about healthy eating in our school curriculum. But we just wanted to highlight that Canada's food guide really just shows one way of eating, and it's a very Western culture way of eating as well. And so it's important to know that healthy eating is different for everyone. There is no one perfect way of healthy eating. So for a long time, diet culture has made us kind of associate different labels with food. So for example, things like broccoli is healthy or no more candy, it has too much sugar. Those things are really common and feel so natural for us to say. But putting those labels on food, healthy and bad and unhealthy, they kind of place foods in a hierarchy where some foods, are better than others, and that can then result in us attaching moral value to them. So, I'm bad if I eat candy. So that type of thinking is really, kind of what perpetuates diet culture. And with kids, that type of thinking can kind of disrupt their ability to kind of listen to their body and can lead to disordered eating. So food neutrality is this idea that all foods have the same moral value. So no one food is superior to another. Now, I'm not saying that all foods are the same or equivalent from a nutrition perspective. Of course, some foods have more nutrients than others, but food neutrality isn't saying that all foods are nutritionally the same, but it's kind of about stripping that moral value from foods and the person that eats those foods so that we don't feel that judgment and shame and guilt when eating them. Food neutrality is also recognizing that all foods do provide some form of nutrition. Even candy contains carbohydrates, which are, an essential nutrient that we need for fuel and energy. So all food provides nutrients. So basically, it's kind of a way of putting all foods on an equal playing field and seeing them for what they are, which is food. And so food neutrality is also about kind of developing a relationship of trust with our body, preparing and enjoying a variety of foods, and basically giving ourselves permission to enjoy those foods without feeling guilt or shame. And it's also recognizing that food is more valuable than just nutrition. Thinking of all the memories that you might have around food, the celebrations, the special events, the connection with others, how one meal or dish might bring you back to a moment with a special family member or loved one. So all of those things are valuable, and they are all, they're all valid reasons to eat different foods. So when we create this food neutral environment, it's basically a way of helping kids to feel safe eating a variety of foods. And we've spent, as Claire mentioned, we've spent our whole lives living in this diet culture and hearing messages about, food that are probably very different than this approach that we're talking about today. So changing the way that we talk about food can take time and can be a difficult transition or change. So how do we start? I think the first place to start is just reflecting on our own food rules and biases. So think about, for example, what foods do you think of as good or bad or healthy or unhealthy? And how does the way that you view or label those foods impact the way you feel when you eat them? Also think about who put those ideas in your head about what foods are healthy and unhealthy and where those thoughts kind of came from. So these are just kind of questions to prompt a little bit of reflection. And it's okay if you're still working on unpacking these thoughts about good and bad foods and working on your own relationship with food. You can still work to change the way that you talk about food with your child at the same time. So the next step is kind of changing your language. So I like to think about all the nicknames that we give food, things like guilty pleasure or junk food or treat, and what those words actually mean. And, when we start labeling food with those words, then we kind of think of or apply the same words to ourselves, and especially kids who are very concrete thinkers. So, telling them that a cookie is bad or unhealthy might make them think that when I eat a cookie, I'm bad. So what we suggest instead is kind of changing our language to call food by its name. So for example, instead of calling a food a treat, call it a chocolate bar. Instead of labeling foods as healthy, just call them broccoli or chicken. And maybe instead of describing foods based on their health, we could describe them based on other things like color and texture and flavor. So for example, you could say something like apples are crunchy and sweet, or cookies straight from the oven are soft and gooey. So those are just different ways to describe food. And one thing to be aware of is that we found that actually, or research has shown that actually calling food healthy makes children less likely to think that they will like it. So learning about the health benefits of food is really not likely to impact a child's food decisions. Even we as adults make our food decisions primarily on taste and also on what foods we like and how familiar we are with those foods. So when we label foods as a treat or, special foods, then we kind of give them special status and we put them on this pedestal, and that makes them a little bit more appealing than they would be if they were just another food, kind of on equal playing field with all the other foods. So just something to think about when we're talking about food. So one way that we can kind of bring the concept of food neutrality to life is in the way that we feed our children and who does what. So there is this model for feeding children called the division of responsibility. And it's a model developed by a dietitian, Ellen Satter, and it basically outlines the job descriptions of everyone when it comes to feeding children. So the role of you as a parent or caregiver is to decide what to pack in a lunchbox at school or what to offer at home. And then when your child is home, it's also your role to decide when they eat and where they eat. So for example, your responsibility is kind of determining, dinner is at 5:30. We're all going to sit at the table and we're going to have tacos tonight. And then the kid decides what and how much to eat from the foods that you're providing. They can also decide which foods they want to eat in front of different or before other foods, and whether they want to eat at all. And that helps, giving kids that responsibility helps them develop and listen to their own body cues and their hunger and fullness cues, and just is putting that trust in them to develop that trust in their bodies. And then when you just wanted to note that when your child is at school, the school kind of takes over the role of deciding when to eat and where to eat. So that kind of is a school responsibility, and the child still decides what they're going to eat and how much. So sometimes we see roles getting a little bit blurry here, and people are trying to do kind of other people's jobs in feeding children. So for example, with the, schools might have this healthy snack first policy where students are kind of encouraged to eat their healthy foods like their fruits and vegetables before any foods that are maybe perceived to be less healthy. And that means that they are kind of taking over that student's job of determining what to eat and how much. And then in an effort to promote healthy eating, sometimes we see, comments made about in the school environment about contents of lunches packed from home. So for example, might be told that certain foods shouldn't be packed in lunches because maybe they're unhealthy. And that can really create distrust between the child and their caregiver. So for example, might lead a child to thinking, why is my parent sending me something that, someone in my school is saying is unhealthy? And then at home, it's not uncommon for us as parents to worry about whether our children are getting the right nutrition. And that can ultimately lead us to feeling like we need to pressure them to eat certain types of foods. Many of us grew up in a house where it was a common message that you had to eat your vegetables before you could have your dessert. And while that might be helpful in the short term, it might make me eat my peas at dinner tonight. In the long term, it's not really going to help them develop that positive relationship with food, which is much more important than what they eat at dinner tonight. So just wanted to reiterate, it's important to think about what your role is as a parent. You choose what foods are provided, you decide when meal times are and where they are, and then you leave the rest up to your child. And doing that can actually relieve a lot of the stress and pressure from meal times and make them a lot more enjoyable. Pass it back to Claire.
Thanks, Kelly. So let's put it all together with some tips for how to support your child. So children hear and see many messages about food, health, bodies, shape, and size. Negative messages that focus on weight can be harmful to our child's self-esteem and can lead to negative body image and negative behaviors such as disordered eating. So we can start by accepting ourselves and others as they are and reflecting on your own internal beliefs, attitudes, and actions around body size, eating, and physical activity. We have a resource that we put together that will be shared after a presentation, but we will kind of go over sort of 10 tips to help your child to have a positive relationship with food and their body. So the first one is knowing your feeding role. So this is just what Kelly was reviewing with the division of responsibility, where the parent and caregiver decides where and when and what to offer, and then trusting your child to decide which foods to eat from in the order that they choose and how much to eat. Offering a variety of foods at mealtime and offering at least one food that you know that they will eat is often a good practice as well. And focusing on enjoying the meal and having a neutral or positive conversation your child is eating. The second tip we have is to remove pressure from food. Eating a variety of foods and learning to enjoy a variety of foods is a skill that takes time to develop. Your child will eat best at meal times if the meals are relaxed and calm. And so instead of saying, oh, eat one more bite or finish your plate, let them decide when they're done eating and avoid using food as a reward or punishment. Dessert does not need to be earned. The third tip we have is to practice food neutrality, which we talked about earlier. Having a positive relationship with food means being comfortable eating a variety of foods that support both nutrition and enjoyment. Number 4 is to eat together. Eating meals with others is a great way to connect and spend time together and share about your day. It also allows us to share our culture and tradition through food. Eating together as a household has been shown to also be protective against disordered eating and eating disorders in adolescence. Number 5 is to have fun with food. Get your kids involved in food and gardening and cooking, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Food literacy it takes time and skills, and it can be fun. There's lots of books as well about food. One we like is Bilal Cook's Doll. And taking time to explore food using the 5 senses. What does it look like, feel like, smell like, taste like, or sound like? Trying foods from different cultures and to learn about where food comes from. Children are more likely to eat the foods that if they are familiar with them, and so providing them with lots of opportunity to explore a variety of foods can increase their willingness to try some different foods. Number 6 is to be a positive role model. So keeping diet culture out of the home as best we can. Notice how you talk about your body and weight and food. Role modeling isn't about being perfect or always feeling positive about your own body. That's not realistic. It's about reflecting on things like how you speak about your body in front of your child and potentially adapting some of your own behaviors. Maybe letting your child hear you say one positive thing about your body a day, showing your child that you yourself enjoy and eat a variety of foods rather than restricting certain foods or dieting in front of your kids, because we know that they will pick up on that. Number 7, talk about body diversity. Talk about how all bodies are good bodies and come in a variety of shapes and sizes, short, tall, fat, thin. And all bodies deserve respect, and that a person's worth is not determined by their size. Explore books that talk about body diversity. A couple that we like are The Body Book and Bodies Are Cool. Number 8, teach your kids to be critical of media. So building in some media literacy here, talking about how media and social media can impact our body image. Talk about how pictures don't always depict reality and how things can make us feel, how this can make us feel about our bodies. Help your child to set boundaries with social media. Number 9, rethinking compliments. So body talk, which is any conversation about another person's appearance, can be harmful even if it's intended as a positive compliment. So earlier we mentioned a common compliment is you look great, you've lost weight. Although it might be well-meaning, it can be harmful because it shows that person that you're comparing and evaluating their body to what it was like before. It assumes that weight loss is always positive and healthy, and it teaches kids that people like you if you've lost weight. So it's best not to comment at all on bodies or appearances and instead focus compliments on to your child and to others around you on their unique qualities and talents instead of their appearance. An increased focus on appearance can devalue the other qualities that make us interesting. Number 10 is move for fun. So find movement that is joyful and fun and explore a variety of activities to find ones that you and your children enjoy doing. Focus on how movement can help build self-confidence, to help us sleep well and manage stress. Avoid talking about physical activity as a form of punishment for eating certain things, and it's not something that needs to make up for eating something, for example. And as I mentioned, we do have a resource that we'll share at the end of the webinar today.
Perfect. So just wanted to recognize that January is a really tough time of year. Body and diet talk is really common, and a lot of people are struggling with their own relationship with food and their own relationship with their body. And as a result, we might hear some comments about bodies or food made. Sometimes it's hard to know how to respond, especially in the moment, and especially if these comments are made in front of our kids. So just wanted to provide, a few ideas for how you might be able to respond if you do hear kind of weight or diet talk in front of your children or even not. So it's just important to recognize you don't always have to have the perfect thing to say. And you also don't always have to put on your, anti-diet culture advocate hat. You can just kind of change the subject, and that is okay. We don't always have the capacity to respond or engage in a conversation. And some individuals we might just kind of know are maybe not ready to change. So it's okay to kind of redirect the conversation as best as possible in the moment. But in some situations, you might feel like you can say something, or it might be a good opportunity to kind of start a positive conversation. So one thing you could do is to try and kind of reframe a comment as a question. So for example, kind of saying, why do we spend so much time being critical of our bodies? Or why is it that we're always talking about diets and food in this house? So those are just ways that you can kind of maybe get the person to think about what they're saying a little bit. You can also try kind of using I statements, so sharing how something is impacting you directly, and being really honest about how a comment is making you feel. So for example, you could say, I really worry about how this type of diet talk might negatively influence my kids. Can we talk about something else instead? And just kind of sharing your perspective and why you're concerned about it. So that might be one way to respond. And then if the conversation feels overwhelming, or, it's okay to remove yourself from the conversation or your kids as best as possible. And another thing that is okay is to set boundaries with people. So for example, letting friends and family know, or grandparents or things like that, that, in this house, we don't talk about dieting or weight in front of our kids. So setting a boundary is, can be helpful in some circumstances. So just, wanted to share that recently I was at a Christmas gathering, and we had some family members kind of enjoying their dessert plate. And another family member kind of came up and said, oh, you'll have to spend extra time at the gym for all of that. And I just kind of casually said, food doesn't need to be earned. You deserve dessert, whether you work out or not. And everyone just kind of moved on, and it was okay. But so sometimes it feels good to stand up a little bit and, say something, and other times you might not have the capacity, and that's okay too. So before we wrap up, we just wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to reflect a little bit more on your own food and body thoughts. So creating a positive relationship with food and eating disorder prevention really starts with us reflecting on our own food and body image thoughts. So just listed some questions on the slide that might help to prompt your reflection. So for example, thinking about whether you ever express guilt out loud after eating certain foods, or if you do make comments about other people's weight or appearance. And diet culture is so sneaky, like we've said, that you might not even notice these ways that it's coming up. And if you do some of these things, it's okay. Be kind to yourself. And like Claire has said, we're all swimming in this, I like to think of it as like diet culture soup. And it's really hard to get out of that. So be kind to yourself. And, the first step is kind of recognizing where it comes up for you. So we covered a lot today, maybe some new concepts to some folks. So just wanted to, say that, not everything is always in our control, but maybe there's one thing today that you might be able to change or think about going forward. Maybe it's thinking about, what do I talk about in the lunchroom at work with my colleagues about dieting, or just being more aware of, the messages in the media in your house that you see with your kids. So, unlearning diet culture takes time, but if there's one thing you can do, that's part of the practice to maybe move the dial a little bit. So before we wrap up, also just wanted to include some resources that might be helpful. On this slide, we listed some registered dietitian services that are available for anyone interested in connecting with a dietitian. And on this slide, we've listed some websites and books, podcasts, and social media accounts that are great resources for those that are interested in kind of learning more about food neutrality and weight bias and relationship with our bodies. And these resources will be sent to you after the presentation as well, if you want to kind of click through. And also just wanted to kind of highlight one resource in particular. So now that you are a little bit more aware of diet culture, you might start to notice things coming up in your child's class that maybe aren't seeming quite right. So maybe they're having to sort healthy and unhealthy foods into two piles, or maybe you're getting kind of a note home saying that you can't have chocolate chips in the muffin at lunch or something like that. We know that teachers want the best and educators want the best, and not everyone is really aware of this topic and diet culture and its impact. So there's a great link. It's the fourth one from the top from Dietitians for Teachers, and it's basically a kind of a guide for parents providing ideas on how to bring up concerns with your child's educator or teacher. So just wanted to point you to that in case that's coming up for you. So thank you everyone for taking the time to attend today to learn more about this topic. We are so passionate about this topic and hope that you found it helpful and that you did learn something new today. And now we hope to have some time to kind of answer any questions that you might have.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. I'm just taking a look here in the Q&A and I don't see any posted questions at this moment. So the next step for me is I'm going to now allow the microphone for any attendees, just in case somebody's technology is, having a day and finding the Q&A just was not going to happen. So if you do have something you would like to contribute at this point, you should be able to unmute yourself. You are welcome to pose a question to either of our fantastic presenters as well. Sometimes I give a bit of wait time. And so I am a little curious, Kelly, a few slides ago, you mentioned the access to dietitians, and I'm a little curious to know how common do you think this viewpoint is amongst dietitians at this point? Like if I call up telehealth to speak to a dietitian, am I for sure going to be having an experience with somebody who will talk about body neutrality or like kind of not have as much weight bias or fat phobia? What does that look like, would you say, in terms of dietitians and access?
That's a great question. Yeah, I would say at this point it's probably a little bit of a mixed bag, unfortunately. So there are quite a few dietitians, and I would say like a really strong growing movement of dietitians, kind of having this perspective and, changing the historical way that we might as dietitians have approached food, but not all. So there is providers in I think both of our respective communities, that Claire and I might have know a little bit more that might be maybe better choices that kind of operate from this weight inclusive and food neutral approach. So if there's anyone interested and they want to connect with you, and we can kind of try and connect the pieces to get in touch with someone who definitely supports this approach.
Fantastic, thank you.
Hopefully we'll get there where everyone is on board.
Yeah. So I notice a guest has their hand up. You are more than welcome to go ahead.
Hi, I'm just wondering if you have a list of the books that you would recommend sharing with kids that we can read at home.
I know that Dietitians for Teachers has a list on their website. We don't have one fully collated, unless Kelly, I don't know if your health unit does, but I typically direct folks to the list on Dietitians for Teachers.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you
question.
just Google Google Dietitians for Teachers book list. You should be able to find it there. And maybe we can have that sent out with the resources after as well. That's okay.
Absolutely. So just so everyone's aware, an email will be going out tomorrow, and it'll include the resources from Claire and Kelly. It'll include that book list as well, and then it'll also include a link to a brief survey. And additionally, you also have that contact information. Should you have follow-up questions after the presentation, you are more than welcome to reach out as well. Give it a few more moments here to see if anybody else has any other questions, and I'll check the Q&A one more time. Don't see anything. So I will pass it back to Cindy with all of our gratitude to try and close this out for the evening.
Okay. So I just wanted to say just such a big welcome, or sorry, a big thank you to our guest speakers tonight. And thank you, Claire and Kelly, for such an informative presentation. So should someone have any questions, and our contact information is on this slide. And just if we could take a minute of your time when an email does come out tomorrow, we are looking for any feedback about this presentation, as well as we do have a mailing list that we also have as well. So just if there's any other ideas or you'd like to be on our mailing list, if you would like to do that as well. So again, we just want to say thank you, and we hope that you have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, everyone.